Before we begin, if you enjoy dark history, true legends, and ghost stories, like, comment, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Anne Boleyn is one of the most famous women in English history, but the reason her name still echoes through old stone halls is not only because she was a queen. It is because her life ended in a way that felt unfinished, violent, and public. She rose into the center of power, helped change the course of a kingdom, and then was erased in front of everyone. That kind of ending does not stay buried for long. For centuries, people have claimed that Anne Boleyn still walks the places tied to her life and death. The Tower of London is the most famous of them all. Blickling Hall is another. Hever Castle, her childhood home, is often mentioned too. In each place, the story changes slightly, but the feeling stays the same. Anne is remembered not just as a historical figure, but as a presence that never fully left. To understand why the legend of her ghost became so strong, you have to understand the scale of her story. Anne Boleyn was born around 1501 into a family that understood ambition very well. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, moved within the orbit of power. Her family knew how to navigate court life, and Anne herself was educated beyond what many women of her time could expect. She spent time in Europe, learned the manners and politics of royal society, and returned to England with a presence that made people notice her. She was intelligent, composed, and difficult to ignore. At court, those qualities could be dangerous. When Henry VIII first took interest in Anne, he was already married to Catherine of Aragon. But Henry wanted something Catherine had not given him: a male heir. Anne refused to become simply his mistress. She held her position carefully and made Henry wait. That refusal changed everything. The king pursued her relentlessly, and the struggle to marry Anne became one of the most consequential conflicts in English history. What followed was not just a romance, it was a break with Rome, a religious upheaval, and a transformation of royal authority. Henry wanted Anne, and he wanted a son. The marriage to Catherine had to end, and the church would not easily grant that. So Henry broke away from the Catholic Church entirely, creating a crisis that reshaped England for generations. Anne Boleyn stood at the center of it, and for a brief moment, it looked as if she had won. But in courts like Henry's, victory is often temporary. Anne became queen in 1533, and her daughter Elizabeth was born in 1533 as well. Yet the pressure surrounding Anne only grew. Henry's attention shifted. The court that had once admired her began to resent her. She had enemies, and she had failed to produce the male heir the kingdom expected. Miscarriages followed. Tension grew. And in a place ruled by suspicion, rumor could become a weapon. By 1536, the ground beneath her had already begun to give way. Then came the accusations. Anne was charged with adultery, incest, and treason. The claims were explosive, the trial was swift, and the evidence has long been viewed as deeply suspect. Historians continue to debate the exact political machinery behind her downfall, but what is clear is that Anne had lost the protection that once made her untouchable. The same court that had elevated her was now prepared to destroy her. She was imprisoned in the Tower of London. That image is central to the ghost legend because the tower itself seems built to hold memory inside its walls. It has served as a royal palace, a prison, an execution site, and a symbol of state power for centuries. Anne was brought there as a condemned queen. She stayed in rooms overlooking the river. She knew what was coming. And yet, even in those final days, she appears to have held herself with remarkable composure. On May 19, 1536, She was executed by sword rather than axe, a choice made to spare her some of the suffering common to public beheadings. According to later tradition, she gave a short speech, prayed for the king, and accepted her end. Her burial took place in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, within the Tower grounds, and then the stories began. The most famous accounts of Anne Boleyn's ghost come from the Tower of London. Guards, visitors and staff have claimed to see a woman dressed in Tudor clothing drifting through the grounds or standing near the chapel where she is buried. In some versions, the apparition appears pale and silent. In others, she walks with a solemn calm, as though she still belongs to the court she lost so suddenly. The most dramatic version of the legend says she appears headless. That image has become one of the most enduring in English ghost lore. Sometimes she is said to carry her own head beneath her arm. Sometimes she is seen near the bell tower or moving across the grounds at night. These stories spread because they give visual form to the violence of her death. They also fit the broader atmosphere of the tower, where so many historical figures suffered imprisonment and execution that the place itself feels layered with unresolved endings. Whether the sightings are interpreted as folklore, imagination, or something stranger, they have made Anne Boleyn inseparable from the tower's identity. Blickling Hall tells a different but equally haunting version of the story. According to tradition, Anne Boleyn returns there every year on the anniversary of her execution in a black carriage drawn by headless horses. The story is old, theatrical, and unmistakably Gothic. It turns her into a visitor from the other side, arriving once a year as if to revisit the world that condemned her. That legend survives because it transforms grief into ritual. A woman who once moved through royal courts now returns only as a spectral figure in the night. The image is not historically verified, but folklore does not always care about verification. It cares about emotional truth, and emotionally, the story fits. Anne Boleyn was once the centre of attention. Then she was removed. A ghostly carriage is the perfect symbol for a woman whose memory keeps arriving long after her death. Hever Castle adds another layer. As Anne's childhood home, it places her story before the crown, before the scandal, before the sentence. Reports from visitors there tend to be quieter. Footsteps where no one is seen, fleeting figures, cold spots, and the sensation that a room has been entered by someone unseen. These are not the kinds of claims that grab headlines, but they give the legend texture. At Hever, Anne becomes less the condemned queen and more the young woman whose future had not yet been stolen. That contrast matters, because Anne Boleyn's ghost survives not only because of the way she died, but because of the life that led to that death. She was ambitious, educated, and politically significant. She influenced religion, monarchy, and succession. Her daughter would become Elizabeth I, one of the most powerful rulers in English history. Anne's legacy is therefore larger than the scandal that destroyed her, but the scandal is what turned her into a legend. Ghost stories often grow strongest where history leaves the most pain behind. Anne's case is especially powerful because her downfall was public. She was not forgotten in secret. She was judged, condemned, and executed in front of a court that had once celebrated her. That creates a lingering sense of incompletion. The world had its spectacle, but the story did not feel settled. So the legend returned, again and again, in the form of a woman seen walking through the same spaces where she had once stood alive. The ghost of Anne Boleyn is more than a spooky tale attached to a famous queen. It is a reminder that history does not always disappear when the body does. Sometimes it lingers in architecture, in folklore, and in the emotional memory of a place. The Tower of London still carries her story. Blickling Hall still repeats it. Hever Castle still preserves the quieter beginning. Together, they form a map of a life that moved from promise to power to tragedy. And that is why her ghost remains so compelling. Not because the story is only terrifying, but because it feels unresolved. Anne Boleyn was once feared, desired, celebrated, and condemned. Now she lives on in the one form no court could ever truly control: memory. And in the shadowed corners of England's oldest sites, that memory still seems to walk.